Hello, I'm Victor, and this is The Junkyard. After watching Day of the Triffids, I got to thinking about what it must be like to be blind. I mean, it's an increasingly visual-based society we live in, and there's a lot we take for granted. So I decided that for today's extended Halloween review, I would look at Steven Seagal's Against the Dark, Blindfolded. I watched the film, but I'm going to be relying on my well-honed muscle memory for the rest. So let me just get out the DVD here and... crap, hold on.
There we are. Anyway, the movie starts with virus, blah blah, infected, blah blah, man-eating vampire zombie things, blah blah, post-apocalypse, blah blah blah. Seagal plays the sword-wielding, line-mumbling leader of a group of hunters who wander around and kill the infected. While he and his team do that, a group of hapless survivors go searching into the depths of an abandoned hospital for some medicine or something. And of course, all the adult females are wearing low-cut shirts, which have the survival advantage of, well, endearing them to the audience, I guess.
Works better than Kevlar in some movies.
The survivors start seeing strung-up bodies and crazy messages while the hunters rip off Left 4 Dead. A woman bent over and sobbing who goes berserk if you get too close. Original. Anyway, after half an hour of what amounts to aimless wandering from both parties, we get a complication. Stereotypical army general shows up and tells the State Department guy who's been unofficially supporting the hunters that they're going to sterilize the area at dawn whether the hunters are out of there or not. This is an especially big problem given that the hunters apparently had only one radio, busted by the witch from earlier, and are now out of contact. Meanwhile, the survivors get split up by a random ambush of zombies.
Okay, seriously, why do none of the survivors have weapons? I understand not being able to get a hold of guns and swords, but no sticks, no knives. You are in a hospital full of metal poles and sharp objects, things like that. Stop ripping off Left 4 Dead and start ripping off Dead Rising.
Anyway, the two survivor groups proceed to wander around the hospital even more. Then those groups are split up further by random attacks. The hunters have since entered the hospital and catch up to a guy from Survivor Group A, while Guy from Survivor Group B is kidnapped by a crazy scientist who wants to feed Survivor to his infected but still intelligent daughter. And no, I'm not going to bother looking up their names. Anyway, the hunters proceed to round up the survivors slowly but surely. But here I do have to talk about Seagal. He's basically a lump. He can't emote, he speaks in a barely coherent mumble, and when he fights, the camera only stays on him for about half a second at a time, using editing to give his slow, simple motions the illusion of animation. Also, I'm not sure if I can fairly blame him for this, but the script really goes weird around Seagal. He seems to know things about characters he hasn't encountered, reacts to things that don't warrant reaction, etc.
I feel bad saying this, but they could have cast an 80-year-old with dementia to play Tao, if the movie makers weren't relying on Steven Seagal's name to sell the movie.
Back to the movie, General assembles some fighters to sterilize the infected area from the air. The survivors and hunters, meanwhile, are continuing through what is apparently the world's largest hospital. In a funny bit, after a scene where Big Hunter gets separated from the group and fights off a couple dozen zombies alone and returns unscathed, female Hunter A gets pulled through a door by one zombie, and the other hunters write her off immediately. Like, before the door closes. That's gotta be bad for her self-esteem. The survivors lose another member when they all get stuck in an elevator and one of them goes out to fix it and they're on their way again. They proceed to lose Hunter Female B and Survivor Female B, and the rest clear the hospital just in time to escape the airstrike. Even the General is happy to see they made it out alive, and the remaining survivors drive off as the remaining hunters walk into the distance.
This film. It had some of the makings of a potentially good story, but overall, it was just dismal.
The characters, for all the time spent on character building, were never very interesting, and the scatter reunite thing just made the story weaker as we were forced to split our focus far too much. The editing in general was annoying, especially since the transition between scenes were half-second shots of the camera flailing about wildly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the only reason this all took place in a hospital was because they couldn't afford more locations. Overall, it wasn't good or bad enough to really enjoy.
Well, that was Against the Dark. Just barely watchable and too slow by half. Well, this has been Victor with The Junkyard. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Alright, so I don't blame you for not believing me, because I barely believed me here, but it was literally after I had watched the movie, after I had written the review, after I had done the audio and the video stuff, and started compiling it, that I finally realized the irony. I don't know what the proper word for it is, so I'll use irony, in me doing a review of a film called Against the Dark, Blindfolded. I would have thought it was intentional too, but really, no pun intended. By the way, this part of the review was actually going to be an either apology or disclaimer stating that I did not mean offense to any blind people by the joke of this review. It was literally just to say that if I attempted to do a review blindfolded, I would bumble it. So yeah.